All right, we're going to be working on exercise 31.1. Our objective is, it says, write a server for a client. The client sends loan information, interest rate, number of years, and loan amount to the server. The server computes the monthly payment and total payment and sends them back to the client. Name the client and the server. You can see what we have to do in terms of layout and design. Clearly, the server just needs a big text area, something we've already done. And then this one's going to be just a little bit more. But I vote that we start with the server first because I think at least graphically that's going to be an easier approach. So let's jump into Eclipse and let's create a new project. And let's call it exercise 31_1. And then once you have that open, right click and create yourself a new class file. And what are we going to call this? Server 31_1. Throw in the main method. Now we have the advantage here, of course, that we were already working through the demo in the chapter, so we can kind of borrow some code and approach from what already pre-exists. So I'm bringing up that first example from chapter 31, and we're going to borrow some things from it. The first thing that we see, of course, is that we need to extend application. That's pretty standard with all the Java effects stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. Of course, that is going to throw some errors. Control space. Let's add the library we need. Then it throws another error, and of course that means we need to add a stage and a scene. That we can just borrow from here. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this verbatim. It worked good for the example, so why would it be any different here? Not what I meant to do. All right, and I'm going to get rid of the comments to save on screen space. You guys should know this stuff by now, right? Now, actually, he's actually using a pane here that we really didn't use much in our exercises, using a scroll pane. And that's basically, I mean, you get what it is, right? It's just a pane that adds a scroll bar when necessary. And that's because the server might keep running and generate a whole bunch of results. So you need a way to scroll through it. All right, so we have our text area. We have our stage. The other thing that we're probably going to do that's identical is we're probably going to do all this kind of stuff, which is create a new thread. So let's go ahead and do that. That does exist inside the start method. So we'll paste it in right here. Now, of course, we have some stuff we know we're going to change. Let's begin by basically deleting some of these things, or we don't need to delete them, but we do need to do a little planning here. Now, the example we had before, we had one thing we were sending. Here we're sending 3 things and we have a button. Okay, so that's different. What is common though is that we have on the client side a label, a text field, label, text field, and button. But the 3 things that we're sending are going to be rate, years, and loan amount. What data types do you think those should be? Okay, double, integer, and double. I agree with that assessment. So let's go ahead and set ourselves up so that we can do that. So we're going to be receiving a double, an int, and a double. So instead of this, let's do a double. And what's coming in? Interest rate. Does that work? And then we have to like basically check the way we have things named, because I'm working off of some examples here where I have stuff named in much different ways. So I got to make sure I don't mess it up. But here it says input from client, right? So I think that's a fine name. So in terms of receiving the data, we can say input from client. And that's a double, right? So we're going to do a read double. And then we're going to have an int. What's the int for? Number of years. Once again, input from client. And this time we're going to do a read int. And we're going to do a double for, what's the last one? Rate, years, loan amount. All right, so that part is done. Again. All right, so now the question becomes, how is it that you calculate loans? I mean, where do I get that information from? Is it in my book somewhere? Yeah, it is always Google, honestly. Why not? Yeah, I'm not going to calculate loan because then I'll get like 50,000 like mortgage websites. I'm going to type in code to calculate mortgage. And better yet, let's put Java code. You guys seeing this? All right, simple sounds good. Now, the thing is, I already have answers up on my screen here, but I'm just showing you that you can go out on the web and find the formulas. They're not that complicated, really. What we do need to figure out is what's the information that we need to send back? That's really the question we should ask here. We need to send back the monthly payment and the total payment. That's all we really need to calculate. All right. So if we're doing a monthly payment, I'm going to paste over some code for the sake of brevity. And then I'm going to have to adjust my code to match up here. All right, so to figure out our monthly payment, I'm trying to figure out our monthly interest rate. So in other words, if you pay X amount of a percent annually for a mortgage, when you make your payments, you're making your payments monthly. So you really need to kind of divide it by 12 to get what the monthly interest is, because it compounds monthly. See, interest is really kind of interesting. When you guys have a credit card, how often does the interest compound on a credit card? Daily. What a racket. On a mortgage, it's monthly. Much better deal. So even if you think you're getting a good interest rate on a credit card, you're not. So if we're supposed to divide by 12, what's with the 0, 0? Yeah, times 100. So in other words, I can put in 3.5 instead of 0.035. Okay? So I can type in the interest rate in a number that makes sense to me. All right, so that's what we're doing there. So those values are all going to transfer in. In terms of the actual calculation, I just suggest that you copy this for, of course, match up your variable names. But this is basically the formula that you'll use. Then in order to get your total payment, you need a separate equation. Where we're going to take that monthly payment, and you can see I'm not using an external library. So let's get rid of that. We're going to use our monthly payment times the number of years times 12. Right? Because what we're doing initially is we have a certain interest rate. We know it compounds monthly. We've broken it down. We figured out what we pay per month. But then over the life of the loan, what are you really paying, right? Do you guys ever calculate that? Like if you buy a house, for like $100,000 and your interest rate's like 5%. And then over the course of 30 years, you're paying $300,000 for the house. You know how you keep that $200,000 out of the bank's hands? Well, either you pay cash, or every month when you make your payment, you pay a little extra. And it really brings down the interest significantly. All right. So now we're doing financial advice. The equations are in the book? Okay. Okay. And that's probably where that file came from. All right, so we have those calculations. And now we're going to push stuff back to the client. The question is, the stuff that we're pushing back, what is it we're pushing back? Well, let's consult the book to see what they want to come back. Monthly payment and total payment. Okay, that's a piece of cake. So we're basically going to use this approach. Now, is the monthly payment a double? Yep. So we can just type monthly payment. And then we're also going to push back the total payment. Total payment. And then it's probably a good idea to change these messages. And if you notice, once again, I'm looking at the desired output here. So we want to echo back. Well, actually, I'm looking at this side. We're going to echo back the interest rate, the number of years, loan amount, monthly payment, total payment. You guys got that? Blazed in your memory. All right. Instead of typing it all out by hand, I'm cutting and pasting and adjusting my variable names. Remember, this is just for brevity's sake. So we're going to output annual interest rate, number of years, loan amount, monthly payment, etc. What does this /n do? You guys remember? New line. Yeah, new line. So I'll leave that up on the screen for a moment. Let's not forget to do our little launch down here. Are we missing anything? Well, we should probably check all this connection stuff. I think it's okay. I don't think we need to change any of it. All right, so I'm going to save this, folks. I know that you guys are furiously copying my code. I get it. I am going to run the application, though, just to see if we have any errors or problems. We don't have any highlights. All right, so it seems to be running. I didn't see a bunch of stuff jump up here at the bottom, so I'm assuming everything's okay. We're taking it on faith at this point. All right, so we're going to switch over to creating the client. And like we did with the server, there's probably a lot of code we can copy from our example. So I'm opening that up, and then I'm going to create a new class file in our project. And let's call that one client 31.1. Let's just put that launch in there right away since it's fresh on my brain. We also know that we're going to be extends application. Yeah, except we're on the client already. I'm not sure if the people in the video can hear my students in the background, but yeah, I know. All right, let's start to figure out the kind of stuff that we're going to need here. Obviously, we're going to need the visual components. So let's go ahead and grab the stage and scene and all that stuff. Let's just drop that in. And I should probably, oh, actually that works, because that's what it is. And you can see here, I'm pulling from an example. In my example, I used the pane as like the main window. I do need to add all the Java effects stuff, so let's do that. Just a control space to bring it up. So we're going to have a pane, and what I did in the past iteration is I actually used a border pane. It seems to be one of the most flexible formats. So I'm going to do new border pane, and once again add the library for it. And then that border pane, if I look at what I'm trying to create, well, remember border pane is center, top, bottom, left, and right. The way I'm seeing it is I only need 2 of those, so I'll probably just use top and center. That seems to make the most sense to me. All right, so since I'm going to do that, I'm going to kind of pre-create a spot to put it. So I'm going to take that pane I created, and I'm going to set the center area to hold. So here I'm instantiating in place, folks, a scroll pane because it might get a bunch of information in it. And I'm going to throw in a text area that I'll just call TA. I know I haven't created it yet, but I will. Let's add the library for the scroll pane. Oh, you see what I just did? I added the AWT library. Is that an AWT library? I guess it is. All right. No, right here. And then we'll set, actually I should have set the top first, but I'm setting the top second. And at the top, if you look at the way he's got it laid out, what would be a good format for this one? Rows and, yeah, it's a grid pane. Rows and columns, it's pretty self-evident. So we'll do a grid pane. I haven't created it, so I'm naming it with a lowercase g, knowing that I'll go back and make it. So let's do that. The scroll pane, I mean, that's a simple one, so that's why I instantiated it in place. But the grid pane is something that we'll want to make separately. So let's do grid pane, called grid pane, which is a new grid pane. All right, so we have some of those components built now. Add the library. And then I'm going to jump up to the top here, and let's create that text area before I forget to do it. And I could do that right here, but I'm actually going to declare it globally so that it's accessible to everything. So in that case, I'm going to do a private, and I'll do text area called TA, and then we'll do new text area, parens. Once again, add the library. Don't do AWT. Now we will also need some input and output stuff. So I'm actually going to grab these two. Is that all right? While I recreate? Let's copy those two. I'm making those globals as well. That's for input and output. And since we have our text area created, here's kind of a little thing I did last time. I'm just looking at my solution code here. I actually set this little method which automatically wraps the text. So if it happens to get too long for the window, it'll wrap it down. Otherwise, what it'll do, because it's a scroll pane, it'll go off to the side and it'll give you a horizontal scroll bar. So I'm just opting to do this because I think it's just a good practice. Okay, let's do a little bit of work inside the grid pane. We have a bunch of little visual components we need to build, right? So looking at the example, we got 3 labels, 3 text fields, and a button. So we got to create all those things. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do grid pane, and I'm going to add, and I'm instantiating in place a label. The why I instantiate in place is because it's just a brute force thing. So it doesn't really matter that I, declare it separately. And then we have to put in a column index and a row index. And if you remember how that works, it's 0, 1, 2, and then 0, 1, 2. So the first position is 0, 0, 0, 0. Okay, now we're going to do 3 labels, right? So I may as well just do them all at once since I can just copy paste. And one's annual interest rate, number of years, and loan amount. And then we're going to stay in the first column, but go down a row for each one. So the first number is column, the second number is row. Now we need to add the library for a label, so I'm doing control space. Make sure it's JavaFX, not AWT. Then we need to create some text fields. I think the text fields would probably, if we're putting our text area up here, it's probably wise to put our text fields up here too. And I want to show you guys a brand new trick I have. It's all called super fast typing via copy paste, because I'm very aware of the clock right now. Add a library. Got our text fields. And then we're going to add each one of these to the grid pane. So once again, we'll do grid pane add, and then we'll just drop in each one of these fields. So let's do interest rate first, and then we're going to be in the second column now, so it's going to be 1, and in the first row, so it's going to be 0. A little more copy paste here. Then we're just changing these names. So we'll do TF num of years and TF loan amount. All right, and then we need one more item, and that's a button. And I suppose we should probably create one. So let's do that up here again. And, probably, the good habit is to do something like this. And of course you can pass the text to it. Add a library. And then we're going to add that to the grid pane. What did I call it? BTN. Submit. And that's going to go in the third column, which would be 2. And the second row, which would be 1. All right, that completes our visual interface. The next thing that we should probably do is throw in a little event handler so that when we click that button, it does something. That would be helpful. We'll do a set on action. We'll throw in our little lambda expression. And then we're going to have a little method called connect to server that we're going to create in just a moment here. And I'm sure you guys can figure out what goes inside of there. Okay. Now, we can be clever here and notice that it's throwing an error. It says, you don't have that. Do you want to create it? Sure. Why not? So I just created it automatically just like that. And we can get rid of the stuff that's inside. And now, once again, here's a spot where we can use some of the code that we already have. Okay, one little tweak I'm going to make before I stop this video here is I actually am going to make this public and void, because that's what we'll need to do with it. This is the one that's going to do all the work for us. Underneath this event handler, I'm just going to add a connection script. And I'm dropping one in that I have pre-created. And it's got a bunch of extra stuff in here from just playing, so I'm going to remove these extra lines and condense it down. And I'm going to put these things all on the same line. It's easier to read. This does require that we add several libraries, so let's get those in there. Yeah, now you're going to ask me, where are these variables? And that is actually based upon what we're naming these. So here I call them to server, from server, and in the past I called them something else. So I need to change those names. And to and from and to. All right, so the last part we need to do is populate this connect to server part. So every time we hit that button, what's going to happen? That's basically the thing we're doing. And what I have here in form of pre-created code, where I have to adjust a couple of different things, and I'm not sure that's it pasted the wrong thing. I apologize. And I know there's a couple of things in here I'm going to need to tweak. And that's mostly just to match up these variable names here. And normally I would condense down my code significantly, so I'm actually just going to do that. I would not normally break the lines apart like this. Because really this code could be much more condensed. Now, if you start reading through what's happening here, it really is kind of just a larger version of the things that we were doing in the previous examples. All right, so this is basically the code for that last little section. I'm going to delete some of the blank space in here. I am getting errors that I'm not really probably going to take. Oh, it just needs the library. Okay. All right, it looks like everything now is accounted for. So the last thing to do is to check to see if it works. So let's save it. We're going to run the server. We're going to run the client. Oop, got to run the right client. Oh, we'll have to change the size of that, I think. Oh, looks like we're missing some text fields. Oh, I added them. Oh, I put them all in the same spot. Yeah, that's why you only see. All right. Yep. Yeah, I should have probably adjusted the size of the window while I was at it. Oh, we got a connection problem. Well, we are out of time to work on this. So your challenge is you have 99% of the code is to fix the connection problem. Right, which is probably the hard part. And get this thing to work. I have a suspicion as to what it is. Anybody have a guess? It says connection refused. All right, we'll have to track it down, but this video has to end here because we have another class starting. I think you guys caught me. We got the server open. We really should close the client and then run it again. All right, no errors. All right, but since we have no errors, we can probably throw an interest rate of okay. So the lesson learned there is make sure you launch the right server and client, and then also check both to see if the calculations are working on both ends. All right, folks, that's a wrap. We'll see you next week.